And let me say this in English so you can understand what I'm saying.
I have translation.
No, I know you have translation, but I just want to make sure you get it right. There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of the lack of decision making, trying to be politically correct, or assuming that they know the Middle East and they know Islam and they know the others far better than we do. And I'm sorry, but that's pure ignorance.
这是关于美国众议院传贯哈佛、宾大和麻省理工3所大学校长的听证会的第3个视频。上一集叙述了3位校长如何与同坐证人席的犹太历史专家以及那些为他们寻求辩护的议员们，一同试图将这次由极左派别发动的排犹主义浪潮转化成历史性问题的一部分嫁祸给极右翼。而这一集我将着重展示3位校长，尤其是现已成众矢之的的哈佛校长，摆弄修辞学技巧，曲解言论自由的定义，为自己偏袒支持哈马斯的学生群体的策略进行狡辩。影片开头的短片是2007年阿拉伯联合酋长国的外交部长在一次记者会上的演讲。他敏锐地预判到西方社会的左倾将导致对极端伊斯兰主义的纵容和绥靖，这会滋生出更多恐怖主义组织。西方左派的高傲和自大，以及一些政治家别有用心的误导，把伊斯兰教误判成一种文化来包容，而不是当作宗教来看待。这给予极端伊斯兰主义在欧洲生长的土壤，为西方社会带来巨大灾难。因为在后者的教义中并不包括包容、同情和分享，他们的养分来自对立、仇恨和暴力。为更好地理解这种危害的严重性，让我们再来观看另一部短片。
Long live the resistance, yes. Long live the resistance. One of the greatest days of my life.
Alright, you heard it here.
Someone stomped on your flag.
Was it one of the greatest days of your life? How did it make you feel?
How did October 7 make you feel? One of the greatest days in the history of decolonization.
I can't wait for you to fucking die.
Yes, dox me, please, dox me.
伊斯兰极端主义意识形态与西方本身日益增长的极左思想不谋而合。在这部短片中，一群无政府主义者毫无廉耻地表达对哈马斯的支持，为后者的恐怖主义暴行叫好。回到我们的主题上来，这场听证会的主角3所名校的校长，他们在各自大学中的所作所为，正是在帮助这2群人破坏社会和谐，在学术和道德层面混淆视听，误导更多学生加入这场反人类、反文明的暴动当中。而犹太学生和以色列国只是他们名义上的目标，是反对当代西方民主宪政制度的一个借口。在质询环节中，一位议员引用 Barry Weiss 于近期发表的一篇文章中的一段话，精确地捕捉到了此次排犹主义的深层原因。
This makes me think of a recent book written by Barry Weiss that seeks to define anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism successfully turns Jews into the symbol of whatever a given civilization defines as its most sinister and threatening qualities. When you look through the dark lens, you can understand how under communism, the Jews were the capitalists, how under Nazism, the Jews were the race contaminators. And today, when the greatest sins are racism and colonialism, Israel, the Jew among nations, is being demonized as the last bastion of white racist colonialism, a unique source of evil, not just in the region, but the world. Whatever the role the Jews are needed for, well, that's the part they are forced to play. And that's the part they are forced to play on your campuses, which is why you're here today. I want to just say that I'm greatly concerned that students are being taught to view certain groups as oppressors. And now apparently that includes Jewish people. And the silence on my 2 direct questions, I think, serves a glaring answer for your lack of commitment for standing in opposition. I fear our future and the future of our nation when oppression is used so generally to green light reverse discrimination by people that hide behind your institutions and this institutional leaders themselves.
这位议员所提到的反向歧视，描述的是西方社会少数群体寻求平权的社会运动，逐步演变成追求政治上的特权，并且左派将这种破坏传统普世价值的做法，通过教育和宣传确立为政治正确，使得在社会生活的许多方面，确保少数群体的权益，必须要以牺牲多数群体的利益作为代价。在种族问题上，则主要体现为有色人种对白人的歧视。根据诸多数据显示，这正是美国乃至整个西方世界所面临的主要问题之一。对有色人种的犯罪行为和司法量刑，已偏离法治精神的公平公正原则。 哈佛、宾大和麻省理工3所大学都设有一个名叫 DEI 的部门，它是多样性、平等和包容的缩写。然而在实际贯彻过程中，它已然成为反向歧视的阵地。它公然将有色人种和白人区分对待，在学生们的思想中植入种族分离的意识。它暗示避免歧视必须以种族对立作为前提，也正是这种错误的引导为近代排犹主义埋下祸根。它与民间一直流传的关于犹太人的著名阴谋论产生化学反应，将本来在族裔和宗教上都属于绝对少数群体的犹太人与极端左派偏执相信的白人资本主义已经犯下的和各种正在密谋的罪行结合起来，使犹太人成为属于多数群体的白人最邪恶的象征。这种建立在历史久远的阴谋论和极左对立哲学暴命革命的基础上的排犹主义，是一种极端意识形态的怪胎。Fox 博士引用纽约州共和党参议员 Chuck Schumer 曾发表的演讲来表达这种现象之荒唐。
Many of the people who express these sentiments in America aren't neo-Nazis or card-carrying Klan members or Islamist extremists. They're in many cases people that most liberal Jewish Americans felt previously were their ideological fellow travelers. Not long ago, many of us marched together for black and brown lives. End of quote. You see, this speech by the most powerful elected Jewish politician in America was addressed to many on his left flank. He questioned how these elements of the left, which pride themselves on diversity and inclusion, could be responsible for fomenting such hatred toward liberal Jewish Americans. I quote Majority Leader Schumer to you, Presidents Gay, McGill, and Kornbluth, because I understand that speech to be a sort of reckoning for the Jewish identity with the radical left. Yet, however, after the events of the past 2 months, it's clear that rabid anti-Semitism and the university are two ideas that cannot be cleaved from one another. A prime example of this ideology at work is at Harvard, where classes are taught such as DP 385, Race and Racism in the Making of the United States as a Global Power. The Harvard Global Health Institute hosts seminars such as, quote, Scientific Racism and Anti-Racism, History and Recent Perspectives. Even the Harvard Divinity School has a page devoted to, quote, social and racial justice. What I'm describing is a grave danger inherent in assenting to the race-based ideology of the radical left. Institutional anti-Semitism and hate are among the poison fruits of your institution's cultures.
Fox 博士尤其强调哈佛大学对犹太族裔的系统性歧视。哈佛校长把维护言论自由当作挡箭牌，为自己对此次排犹主义风暴的应对不力极力辩护。然而，议员们不会轻易被他的说辞蒙蔽，大概从3个方面进行了有力的驳斥。首先，这3所大学近些年并不具备言论自由的传统，反而是言论管制最严重的学校。
Harvard also, not coincidentally, but causally, was ground zero for anti-Semitism following October 7th, and is the single least tolerant school in the nation, according to the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression's 2024 College Free Speech Rankings. UPenn is right behind them at 247th of 248th. MIT is in the middle of the pack.
随后 Warburg 议员更是扯下几位校长言论自由的遮羞布，揭示他们贯彻言论自由时有严重的倾向性。对他们来说，言论自由似乎只适用于左派观点的表达，对于右派观点的学说则不受言论自由的保护。
President Gay, did you know that 70% of Harvard students say that shouting down a speaker is acceptable?
That is not okay.
I appreciate that. It seems that perhaps Harvard's commitment to free speech is pretty selective. As you are no doubt aware, prominent alumnus Bill Ackman tweeted you a letter on Sunday, and in that letter, and I have that tweet, I guess that's the beauty of social media, you can get those things. In that letter, he highlighted 2 cases of Harvard faculty members who were canceled because of views deemed too controversial for your campus. Tyler J. Vanderweel was deemed guilty for those crimes related to his views on marriage and abortion. And then Carol Hoven, an evolutionary biologist, was forced to resign because she stated that a person's sex is biological and binary. Mr. Ackerman's letter also included quotes from a number of faculty highlighting the culture of fear that pervades Harvard's campus for those with views out of step with campus orthodoxy. And so, President Gay, in what world is a call for violence against Jews protected speech, but a belief that sex is biological and binary isn't? So for Professor Vanderweel and Hoven, that didn't work for them. The free expression of views, at the very least, views, whether fact or truth, I guess we'll leave that to understanding, but nonetheless, they were removed from their positions. And I think that sends a message in this case with Jewish students, that they're of less importance.
面对当前校内外明显的排犹主义言行，3所大学的校长采用的绥靖政策，正是凭借这种虚假的双重标准的言论自由作为借口。Stefanik 议员和Kiley议员的提问，更是对这几位校长在这方面的伪善进行了精准打击。
Dr. Gay, a Harvard student calling for the mass murder of African Americans is not protected free speech at Harvard, correct?
Our commitment to free speech...
It's a yes or no question. Is that corrected? Is that okay for students to call for the mass murder of African Americans at Harvard? Is that protected free speech?
Our commitment to free speech
It's a yes or no
extends...
question. Let me ask you this. You are president of Harvard, so I assume you're familiar with the term intifada, correct?
I've heard that term, yes.
And you understand that the use of the term intifada in the context of the Israeli-Arab conflict is indeed a call for violent armed resistance against the state of Israel, including violence against civilians and the genocide of Jews. Are you aware of that?
That type of hateful speech is personally abhorrent to me.
And there have been multiple marches at Harvard with students chanting, quote, "There is only one solution, intifada revolution," and, quote, "globalize the intifada." Is that correct?
I've heard that thoughtless, reckless, and hateful language on our campus, yes.
So based upon your testimony, you understand that this call for intifada is to commit genocide against the Jewish people in Israel and globally, correct?
I will say again, that type of hateful speech is personally abhorrent to me.
Do you believe that type of hateful speech is contrary to Harvard's code of conduct, or is it allowed at Harvard?
It is at odds with the values of Harvard.
Can you
But
not
our
say here that it is
values
against the
also-
code of conduct at Harvard?
We embrace a commitment to free expression, even of views that are objectionable, offensive, hateful. It's when that speech crosses into conduct that violates our policies against bullying, harassment,
Does that speech
and
not
intimidation.
cross that barrier? Does that speech not call for the genocide of Jews and the elimination of Israel?
When
You
that
testify that you understand that is the definition of intifada. Is that speech according to the code of conduct or not?
We embrace a commitment to free expression and give a wide berth to free expression, even of views that are objectionable.
You and I
outrageous,
both know
and
that's not the
offensive.
case. You were aware that Harvard ranked dead last when it came to free speech. Are you not aware of that report?
As I observed earlier, I reject that characterization.
It's the
of our
data shows
campus.
it's true. And isn't it true that Harvard previously rescinded multiple offers of admissions for applicants and accepted freshmen for sharing offensive memes, racist statements, sometimes as young as 16 years old? Did Harvard not rescind those offers of admission?
That long predates my time as president.
But you
so I can't
understand
speak.
that Harvard made that decision to rescind those offers of admission.
I have no reason to contradict the facts as you present them.
Correct,
here.
because it's a fact. You're also aware that a Winthrop House faculty dean was let go over who he chose to legally represent, correct? That was while you were dean.
That is an incorrect characterization of what transpired.
What's the characterization?
I'm not going to get into details about a personnel matter.
Well, let me ask you this. Will admissions offers be rescinded or any disciplinary action be taken against students or applicants who say, "From the river to the sea" or "Intifada," advocating for the murder of Jews?
As I've said, that type of hateful, reckless, offensive speech is personally abhorrent to me.
Today that no action will be taken. What action will be taken?
When speech crosses into conduct that violates our policies, including policies against bullying, harassment, or intimidation, we take action, and we have robust disciplinary processes that allow us to hold individuals accountable.
What action has been taken against students who are harassing and calling for the genocide of Jews on Harvard's campus?
I can assure you we have robust
What
disciplinary
actions have been
processes
taken? I'm not
with
asking.
actions underway.
I'm asking what actions have been taken against
Given-
those students.
Given students' rights to privacy and our obligations under FERPA, I will not say more about any specific cases other than to reiterate that processes are ongoing.
Do you know what the #1 hate crime in America is?
I know that over the last couple of months, there has been an alarming rise of anti-Semitism, which I understand is the critical topic that we are here to discuss.
That's correct. It is anti-Jewish hate crimes. And Harvard ranks the lowest when it comes to protecting Jewish students. This is why I've called for your resignation, and your testimony today not being able to answer with moral clarity speaks volumes.
由于每位议员的发言时间仅有5分钟，所以 Stefanik 议员无法在其有限的时间内完成对3位校长的追问，所以另有几位议员将自己的一部分时间让给他。也正是在 Stefanik 议员的穷追猛打下，3位校长尽显丑态，在听证会后引发了众人的强烈不满。
Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules on bullying and harassment?
The rules around bullying and harassment are quite specific, and if the context in which that language is used amounts to bullying and harassment, then we take action against it.
Can you say yes to that question of does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules on bullying and harassment?
Calling for the genocide of Jews is anti-Semitic.
So yes.
And that is anti-Semitic speech. And as I have said,
And it's
when
a yes.
speech crosses into conduct,
And it's a yes. I've asked the
when
witnesses.
speech crosses into conduct, we take action.
So is that a yes? Is that a yes? The witness hasn't answered. Madam Chair, is that a yes? You cannot
When
answer the
speech
question.
crosses into conduct,
I'm sorry.
we take action.
I'm sorry, Dr. Gay.
At MIT, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
If targeted at individuals, not making public statements.
Yes or no? Calling for the genocide of Jews does not constitute bullying and harassment?
I have not heard calling for the genocide for Jews on our campus.
But you've heard chants for intifada.
I've heard chants, which can be anti-Semitic depending on the context, when calling for the elimination of the Jewish people.
So those would not be according to the MIT's code of conduct or rules?
That would be investigated as harassment if pervasive and severe.
Ms. McGill, at Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment, yes.
I am asking specifically calling for the genocide of Jews. Does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
So the answer is yes.
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. That is not bullying or harassment. This is the easiest question to answer yes, Ms. McGill. So is your testimony that you will not answer yes?
If it if the
Yes
speech
or no?
becomes if the speech becomes conduct, it can be harassment. Yes.
Conduct meaning committing the act of genocide? The speech is not harassment? This is unacceptable, Ms. McGill. I'm going to give you one more opportunity for the world to see your answer. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's code of conduct when it comes to bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be harassment.
The answer is yes. And Dr. Gay, at Harvard, Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
What's the context?
Targeted as an individual, at an individual.
It's targeted at Jewish students, Jewish individuals. Do you understand your testimony is dehumanizing them? Do you understand that dehumanization is part of anti-Semitism? I will ask you one more time. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric.
And is it anti-Semitic rhetoric?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric when it crosses into conduct that amounts to bullying, harassment, intimidation, that is actionable conduct, and we do take action.
So the answer is yes, that calling for the genocide of Jews violates Harvard Code of Conduct, correct?
Again, it depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign. These are unacceptable answers across the board.
或许是害怕的承担责任，或许就是出于某种不敢直接表达的排犹主义倾向，再或者可能由于代表某种意识形态的政治压力，三位校长想尽一切办法，不愿直接回答这个在法律和道德上都应回答 yes 的问题。Kiley议员在我的上一个影片中已有出现，这期影片继续展示他通过精准提问，揭露三位校长在面对自己喜欢和不喜欢的言论时毫无遮掩的双重标准。
Would you say that a person who is an avowed neo-Nazi is someone that you would want to be part of the Harvard community?
Those are not consistent with Harvard's values, but at the same time, we allow a wide berth for free expression.
But the question was, would you want
views.
such a person who is an avowed neo-Nazi to be part of the Harvard community? Yes or no?
Those are not consistent with Harvard values.
So you would not want such a person to be part of the community?
Those are not consistent with Harvard values.
Would you want someone who has called for the eradication of the Jewish people to be part of the Harvard community?
Again, those are not consistent with Harvard values, where we are committed to making
Would you
no
want someone
space on
who
our
has
campus
called for the elimination of the
anti-Semitism.
state of Israel to be part of the Harvard community?
There is no place at Harvard for anti-Semitism.
But the elimination of the state of Israel, someone who advocates for that, is that someone you'd want to be part of the Harvard community?
There is no place for anti-Semitism at Harvard.
You're not answering my questions very well, Dr. Gabe, so I'll move on. You've said today that you're proud of Harvard's initial response, the initial steps Harvard has taken in the immediate aftermath of October 7th. But one of your predecessors, Dr. Larry Summers, was anything but proud. He said that in his 50 years of Harvard affiliation, I have never been as disillusioned and alienated as I am today. The silence from Harvard's leadership has allowed Harvard to appear at best neutral towards acts of terror against the Jewish state of Israel. Looking back, is there anything you would have done differently in the aftermath of October 7th?
So to be clear about what I was doing on October 7th, it was identifying whether or not we had any faculty or
students.
Is there
anything you would have
Israel.
done differently?
Had I known that the statement issued by the students would have been wrongly attributed to the university, I would have spoken sooner about it. But I was focused on action that weekend, not statements.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but it's clear for me from your testimony, President Gay, I don't think you're a person of any kind of prejudice yourself, but you clearly seem to believe that that the forces of anti-Semitism are a constituency that needs to be catered to. I think that's clear from your silence, from the carefully parsed statements, from the Orwellian passive voice, and unfortunately, that message was heard loud and clear by the forces of anti-Semitism on your campus and has reverberated across American higher education and seeped into our broader culture.
这两位议员提出的问题切中要害，通过校长们狼狈的回答，我们可以看到其言行不一的伪善，看出他们用修辞学强行摆弄言论自由的拙劣表演。第三个揭露他们滥用言论自由作为借口的方法是，他们在已得知校内存在针对犹太族裔的仇视言论和行为时，并没有采取任何必要行动。他们所说的各种措施都仅停留在口头上。Kiley 议员对他们的这种故意不作为表示震惊。
However, talk is cheap, and we really need action. So what I'd like to talk a little bit about today is what actual action items, not lip service, but action items have happened. So I'll start with you. President Gay, under your leadership, Harvard has done little to condemn Hamas's brutal murder of women and children, promote Israel's right to defend itself, or protect Jewish students from harassment. For example, I'm curious, what action was taken from Harvard when a Jewish student was mobbed on your campus last month? Action, not lip service action, ma'am.
So this specific incident, I've communicated about publicly. So as you may know, that is an incident that is currently under investigation by HUPD and the FBI.
Any action?
And when that investigation is complete,
so you
we
can't
will
answer.
address
I'm
it
going to
through
move
a
on to my
student
next
disciplinary
question. Do you have an action item or not as of this time? Was any action taken? Any action?
I can't share more about.
Will these students intimidating Jewish students just because they are Jewish be expelled from the university?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your question.
Will the students who are intimidating Jewish students just because they're Jewish be expelled?
You're describing conduct that sounds like it would violate our policies against bullying and intimidation and harassment. And if that is the case, it would be addressed through our policies.
Another question. Why did you allow protesters to occupy University Hall for 24 hours? And not only were these students not punished, but two of your deans provided them with food and promised no disciplinary action would be taken. And that was reported by the Harvard Crimson.
I can assure you that we have very strong disciplinary processes, and where conduct violates our policies, we use those policies.
So did conduct violate your policies during that incident?
We have disciplinary processes underway.
So is there an answer to that or not?
We have disciplinary processes underway.
So was any discipline action? I love the lip service. I do. And you academic, I love that. I'm looking for an action item. Yes, no. Was anybody expelled? Any action item. And if you don't know, that's okay too.
We hold our community to account.
All right, I'll reclaim
for our
my
policies.
time. Thank you, President McGill. Under your tenure, swastikas have been drawn outside residence halls where Jewish students live. The Hillel House was broken into. Jewish students urged not to wear symbols of their ethnicity, and those same students harassed when they go to collect kala for Shabbat. I will be submitting questions for the record on outbreaks of anti-Semitism at UPenn, and I look forward to your response because obviously 5 minutes is just way too short of an answer. But I would encourage you to give answers. We deserve answers. People deserve answers, not rhetoric, action items. It is clear that the Jewish students on all of your campuses are afraid to be themselves because you have refused to take real action. There's that word, action, against anti-Semitism.
以上3个方面都可以证明，在3所大学中，尤其是哈佛大学，存在管理层有意营造对犹太族裔的系统性歧视，而这样做的背景是将犹太人视作白人群体的一部分，在崇尚对立的意识形态下，纵容对犹太学生的言语和行为暴力，这源自由来已久的偏激的政治倾向。Grossman 议员从另一个角度再次指出，即便从整体都很锁性的全美所有大学的宏观角度来看，哈佛的极左现状也已达到令人难以容忍的程度。
In 2016, they found about 2% of the faculty of Harvard were viewed President Trump, I think, as okay or good. And I think in the 2020 election, the Crimson, your local paper there, found 1% of the students voting for Donald Trump, which, given that nationwide is about 50-50, was kind of shocking. Does it concern you at all that you apparently have a great deal, a lack of ideological diversity at Harvard, and do you think that atmosphere is maybe one of the reasons why there seems to be such an outbreak of anti-Semitism at your institution? Now, I know all sorts of good people who don't like President Trump, but I'm just saying, when you compare the way people think at your campus compared to America as a whole, if there's one thing you are, it's not diverse. Right? Well, do you consider that a problem, or the numbers I gave you?
Good 议员回顾了10月7日恐袭随后的几天发生在哈佛校园内骇人听闻的排犹主义运动。
Dr. Gay, on October 8, nearly 36 Harvard student groups authored a statement holding Israel responsible for the Hamas attack. On October 18, a Jewish Harvard Business School student was surrounded, accosted, and shoved to the ground while walking near and filming an anti-Israel protest. On November 10, when you condemned the use of the phrase "from river to the sea," over 100 faculty signed a letter criticizing your response to that, criticizing that phrase or condemning the use of that phrase. A Harvard Crimson survey of the class of 2022 showed that 93% of respondents viewed President Trump as unfavorable, 6% of students said they were conservative, 34% of students viewed favorably the Palestinian boycott, divestment, and sanctions, or BDS movement.
另一位议员 Letlow 也提到了哈佛学生团体的那份建立在歪曲事实基础上的声明。
Dr. Gay, an article in the Harvard Crimson dated October 10th includes a statement from the Harvard Undergraduate Palestine Solidarity Committee, co-signed by 33 other student organizations at Harvard. I'd like to read the statement to you. Quote, "We, the undersigned student organizations, hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all unfolding violence." How, Dr. Gay, do you reconcile the blatant hypocrisy of allowing your students a forum to promote and celebrate terrorist groups that make the rape and mutilation of women and children a core function of their operations, while at the same time working for years to combat sexual violence towards women, and by allowing a month to pass before addressing with a real plan and the demonstrations and intimidations on your campuses? What message is this and this delay conveying to your women on your campuses? I can only imagine how terrifying it is to be a Jewish woman on any of your campuses. Just last night, a Jewish student from MIT wrote to me that she felt fearful and was forced to leave her study group during her doctoral exams because someone in her group told her that the women at the Nova Festival deserved to die because they were partying on stolen land.
纵容3所大学纵容排犹主义在校内外肆虐，是否违反法律的辩论其实已有结论。强行以保护言论自由作为托词，实则强词夺理。
Currently, Harvard is being investigated by the Department of Education for Title VI violations of civil rights. Title VI, as you know, prohibits recipients of federal funds from discriminating on the basis of race, color, or national origin. A Title VI violation would occur when an institution has allowed, permitted, or created a hostile environment that targets someone based on their race, color, or national origin.
3位校长还熟练地使用伊斯兰恐惧症这个概念，来为自己不能保护犹太裔学生寻找额外借口。他们谎称穆斯林学生也因哈以战争而遭到歧视。然而众所周知，10月7日恐怖袭击刚刚结束，整个西方社会就充满了涌向街头的庆祝人群。这群人如今大多数都还在支持巴勒斯坦、支持哈马斯的游行队伍中，无论是社会还是校园，都未出现专门针对他们的暴力歧视行为，反而是他们一直在从事各种或和平或暴力的抗议活动。Good 议员明确揭露了3位校长借用伊斯兰恐惧症间接纵容对犹太裔学生的迫害行为。
There is a deeply troubling tendency by many on the left, as has already been expressed in this hearing, in media, academia, among elected officials, and even some on this committee, who try to somehow conflate or equate anti-Semitism with so-called Islamophobia. It's troubling that it seems that it's only Jews or Israelis who, when they're attacked or victimized, somehow become the oppressors or instigators of those attacks in the eyes of leftists or some on Penn's campus specifically. It's wrong to suggest that anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are equivalent problems in this country, as noted already in this hearing. Jewish hate crime is the most predominant hate crime in this country today. Ms. McGill specifically. Again, just this past Sunday night, there was another march on the edge of the UPenn campus, an anti-Israeli march. Has there, at any time since October 7, been an equivalent large-scale gathering of crowds in support of the slaughter of Muslims or the elimination of an Arab or predominantly Muslim state? Has that happened on your campus or anywhere near your campus that you're aware of since October 7?
Congressman, any act of hate, I find
I asked a
abhorrent.
specific question. Has there been any large gathering in support of the slaughter of Muslims or the elimination of an Arab state on or near your campus that you're aware of since October 7?
Congressman, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank
there
you.
Have been...
So you would agree then that it would be immoral or dishonest to treat the two as equivalent problems on campus, meaning anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, that there's an equivalency there on the scale of the scope of the problem on campus. Would you agree that would be immoral or dishonest to equate the two?
Congressman, I abhor all acts of hate.
Would you agree that it's immoral or dishonest to equate the two, that the problems are equal on your college campus or other college campuses? Any evidence of that effect?
Congressman, I abhor all acts of hate.
Thank you.
最后，我想用我个人最欣赏的一位议员的发言来概括整个这一系列的评述。欧文斯议员精准指出，美国这些严重左倾的大学在此次排犹主义浪潮中所暴露出来的丑陋，而且其原因和结果都在年轻人心中埋下仇恨的种子。DEI 也好 ，CRT 也罢，所有这些本来为避免歧视、崇尚宽容、同情和分享的政策，居然被错误的极端化，成为酝酿少数群体仇恨社会和民主宪政制度的温床。他们片面地使用与种族主义和殖民主义相关的理论，被别有用心的人挑起对立情绪，潜移默化地鼓励批判、纵容暴力。他们不再有耐心寻求包容、理解和合作，不再相信普世价值才是建立平等繁荣社会的基石。
One thing that I did learn through my growth of the years is that hate is not passed down in our genes. It's taught or untaught. What we're seeing here is hate being perpetuated. We keep people segregated, keep them from building bridges of trust, never allowing them to find commonality. Teach them that everything that's gone wrong in their life is because of somebody else's actions. Then teach them to look at our differences, our color, creed, and culture, and then teach them to judge each other. It's dehumanizing, it robs people of individuality, but the end game, if it is hate, it is very effective. We teach one race, all minorities, that they are oppressed. Through DEI, we then teach another race, whites and Jews, that they are oppressors. The result is hatred, segregation, the inability for our children to see evil when it's present. One of my Democratic colleagues was asked recently about the use of strategy by Hamas to rape Jewish women and children, girls and women, as terror. Her response was not to defend these women against these evil men, but that she wanted to discuss hierarchical oppression. That is DEI. It's a failure to protect Jewish communities across our country at your universities. And let me just say this also. October 7th was a very different day in our lifetime. And yet, every single time we're talking about anti-Semitism, we some kind of way drift off into every other sense of racism. We're talking about 1,200 lives, babies being burned, beheaded, hostages, and yet we cannot stay focused on anti-Semitism. I just remember a couple of years ago when we were dealing with Black Lives Matter, try to talk about Blue Lives Matter, Jew Lives Matter, Arab Lives Matter, and you'd be called a racist. It's time for us to focus on what's happening on your campuses. And it might sound flowery, all the ideas of what your values might be, but those values are not being translated to our kids. You're seeing them in the streets every single day.